Hey everybody, it is time for another tier list video. This time we're updating both tier lists at the same time because I'm crazy and you deserve it. So it's really just because there's not too much to talk about. So there's classes and there's mythics, and we've got 2 new mythics and 2 new classes since the last time I talked about these. So we've got a couple of new mythics, as I mentioned, one of which is the new hotness, Aquaticus. Hope you got her, hope you're getting her. She just came out today as of this recording, and she's basically Water and Furnace, as I've said before. She's dealing 3 light splash damage instances and then exploding half the blue gems on the board. So if you have a lot of blue on the board, she's better than Infernus as far as exploding. In terms of damage, she's always better than Infernus, just slightly. Her damage will be more consistent than Infernus, because Infernus, if you hit 2 people on the edges, for instance, the splash will only hit one person. With her, you have more opportunities to more than likely hit people in the middle to get the most out of all that splashing. But in terms of just like raw damage, assuming all of the hits hit regardless, she would still be doing slightly more than Infernus, but not a ton. So damage is very comparable. The exploding thing is either better or worse depending on your board situation. Her Tsunami ability, which is submerging all of your allies on a 4 or more match. So what this is actually doing is making you very defensive against AoE type spells. So like anything that says hits all for blah blah. So like Guard's Avatar, for instance, or Elamagrum or Worldbreaker, those kinds of troops, the people that are hitting everybody, that'll protect you 100% from that, so you won't take any damage from those kinds of spells. But that's kind of all it does. So from that perspective, defensively, Submerge is not necessarily the best thing on the planet. Spell reduction by 25% is actually pretty decent. This Waterheart thing is kind of a waste. So again, in terms of Infernus, the comparison that I can't help but make, Infernus is burning everybody on 4 or more. What she's doing is submerging on 4 or more. So again, Infernus is kind of a more offensive version. Aquaticus is a slightly more defensive version of Infernus. So I think just when it comes to my philosophy on the game and how I think others should be playing, offensive teams seem to be way more consistent and better than defensive teams. If your team is trying to turtle up and do kinds of weird things, that's usually not as effective as just blowing the crap out of everybody as quickly as you can. So we'll have to see where that ends up netting her on the tier list. The other one we've got is Vash. So Vash is kind of a weird dude. Admittedly, I don't love him. I love this part of him. All of his traits look very nice. So cursing a random enemy on Browns is super cool. This isn't like a 4 or 5 match, it's just any Browns. So if you're looking to have someone that just passively curse people, he's really good at that. He's impervious, which means you can't really like poke him down with any kind of weird debuff, so that's kind of cool. And then he's got spell armor, so 25% resistance from spells also. So all of these traits are actually really nice. Like, this is looking great. Then we get to this. We get to this birthing pod situation over here. And this is kind of weird. So it devours someone on your own team, and then it summons somebody in their place, a demon. So demons are at least usually pretty interesting troops. The damage he does initially is only based on his current stats, however, so it's not based on the upgraded stats based on the person you devoured. So the first shot you're going to do is pretty weak, and then the next shot you're going to do is notably better. So this kind of puts him in a weird spot where he's kind of someone that requires wind-up. So he's going to take more than, more turns than you would care to give up, let's just say, to get him at his max potential. There's no way that you can just, vastly pump up your team with life in a way that you can just kill everybody in one shot with this, or get this boosted so stupid that it's just crazy. So that's kind of the problem that Vash runs into. His ability is not nearly as strong as I think people might think it is. The fact that it's true damage is kind of nice, but it's true scatter damage. So to get this doing anything super serious, you would have to get this a lot higher. So, and having it intentionally kill somebody on your own team kind of creates an odd scenario where whatever team you start with is not your intended team to be using throughout. So having him devour someone like a Frost Feather, for instance, could be kind of fun, because that will just, freeze everybody when Frost Feather dies, and then you can just use whoever that other troop is. But it creates inconsistency on your team. You basically have to have a really strong 2-person lineup with probably your hero and some other troop, preferably boosting life. And then whoever the other person is just constantly getting rotated out with Vash. So it's kind of very, very limiting as far as how you can use him, how effective I think he actually is. I think he looks very cool, but in terms of his ability, unfortunately, I think this kind of holds him back a little bit. So we'll revisit Vash in a second here. When it comes to classes, I'll just pick one so I can actually look at them properly. The first one that we got is the Corsair. So Corsair here is kind of weird, but this part is super interesting. So gaining 2 gold on 4/5s, this is kind of whatever. High Seas, however, this immediately puts Corsair in the blue mana making machine game. So this is unheard of, really, in terms of blue mana generation. This is a ton of extra. So he gets 2 bonus blue mana every time you match gems. So that's super cool. And spoilers, if you get him up to 70, he also gets another bonus blue. So in terms of total bonus blue, every single time you match blue gems, you're getting 3 if you get this class up to 70. So that's kind of sick. The problem with Corsair class, though, is that the wind tree is pretty much literally all garbage. Like, I don't recommend a single one of these talents ever. Like, none of these are good. Cunning tree is more interesting, but then it kind of fights itself on being interesting. So the water tree in general is pretty strong. Hunt is very, very good, but then you have to fight yourself on, do I want snap, freeze, or hunt? Hunter's Mark on 4/5 is very nice, but freezing somebody at the start of battle is also very nice. So while options are nice, it's kind of limiting in the sense that you can pick which one you want, but I don't want to fight myself for this. Like, if all of these were hard decisions, that would be one thing, but since this class is kind of missing awesome stuff, the fact that the little awesome stuff it has fights with each other is kind of not fun. So Hunt and Snap Freeze, both very cool. Being immune to frozen is kind of whatever. There's really nothing at this level that you really care about. Backup is trash. I hate any kind of summons. Personal choice. Blue Alley's getting 4 life is okay. Obviously, this is going to synergize with a Corsair because you're probably going to be running a mostly blue team with this kind of a thing. At 40, you at least get Submerging on a 4/5, so this gives you a little extra defensive capability. There's really nothing else you would take. And then at 70, we get back into the same problem that we had where you're fighting yourself. So you're either creating a 30% chance to dodge skulls or you're giving yourself bonus blue mana. These, again, are like kind of the only other interesting traits. Like, these are interesting, this is interesting, and then these are kind of interesting. But none of them are busted, none of them are amazing. Down here, you really don't get anything all that great. I will say that if you get Corsair all the way to 100, the Corsair is a rogue class, so this will actually allow you to magic pump the hero itself, so that's kind of noteworthy, but you would have to get the class all the way to 100 to start taking advantage of that. So when it comes to, like, how do you use this class, it's kind of like, it's not a class that I really prefer. It doesn't come with any of the bells and whistles that you generally like on classes. In terms of defensive capability, it doesn't really have much. There's certainly no barriers on browns. It doesn't have skull resistance. It offers Submerge, which is okay. You could argue Freeze is a form of defense. So defensively, this class really has next to nothing to try and help you out. This dodge thing is probably, like, you know, again, you're fighting yourself with this blue mana thing. So, like, how you would play this class, it's kind of a little awkward. There's no obvious, like, role that it plays aside from make a ton of blue mana. So making a ton of blue mana is not necessarily the most interesting of classes to be running with. So that kind of limits where Corsair is going to fall on the placement. I have not seen Corsair light the world on fire. I have not been able to justify, you know, using a Corsair over something like a Frost Mage or a Tide Caller, both of which get access to the water tree and have a lot more interesting traits to go with them. So I'm not sold on the Corsair class yet, but we'll see where I end up dropping them on the list in a second. The other one that I haven't talked about, but I have poked at a lot in my other videos, is the Hierophant class. So Hierophant is doing spell reduction by 25%. This is whatever. This might as well say does literally nothing. Sorry, but this is just so bad that it makes me so upset. So a 25% chance to do a random status effect when your turn starts. When your turn starts is always kind of like the thing that jabs me in the side. So in a game where you're trying to limit the number of turns that you're taking, an ability that triggers on turns implies that you want games to be going a long time, or games are lasting a long time, and they don't really. And this is only a 25% chance to affect one troop with some random positive status effect. So this could maybe be Barrier, which would be great, but if you want a Barrier, then why wouldn't you just run Sentinel, for instance? You know, this might be Submerge, but there's tons of classes that can Submerge already and faster. So I don't think you'd care about that. Could be Bless. Bless is cool. There's no classes that bless yet. But, you know, it's again a 25% chance to bless somebody, and you don't know who that's going to be, and you have to take a bunch of turns to maybe have it happen. So this trait is like deeply upsetting to me, admittedly. I hate to get so emotional about it, but there's nothing good about things that take multiple turns to go. I'm constantly lobbying to see if the developers will try and consider making these trigger on extra turns. But as it stands today, this trait might as well not exist. Obviously, I'm happy it's literally something instead of nothing, but this is basically nothing. So, sorry, I have to get that off my chest. Then when we get to the talent trees, it's a little unfortunate because I think we have like some really decent support trees, but no good like powerhouse trees in here. So when you see life, you know you get access to this cleansing thing, which is cool because you can self-cleanse. You also get access to giving yourself 4 or 5 gems in the light tree, so this is kind of cool. You also have an option to get yourself with a light storm or a firestorm, so that's kind of cool. Like, it's seeming kind of interesting, but then it just falls apart. So, you know, gaining 4 life when you're matching green gems is kind of okay. None of these are good. Bonus yellow is fine, bonus green is fine, bonus red is fine, like this is fine. Fireblade is amazing, but there's Fireblade on other classes that are way better. So like Warlord is insanely more effective at dealing damage, for instance. It's going to be scaling its attack. It has all kinds of, you know, things that are interesting with that class. I shouldn't say all kinds of things. I don't love the Warlord class, but the Warlord class having access to Fireblade makes a lot more sense and is more interesting than this class having access to it, for instance. Then you've got Sunspear, which is my bae, and then you've also got the other classes that have it, like the Dragon Guard. So Dragon Guard is insanely more effective than this class. So, you know, none of these trees are insanely overpowered. The only like top tier talent that you're grabbing out of this entire thing is Fireblade. So when a class has no traits of note and the talent trees are all kind of interesting but not amazing, and then there happens to be Fireblade there, there's really no reason that you'd want to be running this class. If you wanted Fireblade, there's classes that are way better that do it. If you wanted to self-cleanse yourself, there's classes that are way better at doing it. If you want to start with a Light Storm, there's classes that are way better at doing it. And there's classes that even have both of these trees together in the Priest class, for instance, and at least that synergizes with other Divine troops. So Hierophant's kind of like fighting for a reason to exist. It's a Fey troop, which is also, there's like barely any to no Fey synergy in the game. So that's my rant on Hierophant yet again. But enough about all that. Let's actually put some stuff on a board. Let's do that. That sounds more fun. So I want to make some tweaks real quick before I start placing these new little toys over here. I'm putting Obsidius up in S because mana generation is really strong. Stun is becoming even more important. He's very survivable. I'm finding he's being used more and more, and he's becoming more and more valuable, so I'm recommending him to pretty much everybody as a must craft. I'm moving Tina down to B tier because Tina is actually really strong, but also doesn't scale, doesn't loop. The damage output is very good for PvP sometimes, pretty survivable, but the fact that it doesn't loop, like, I'm never super scared when I see a Tina. Like, there's no meta teams that are using Tina. There's no event teams that really use Tina. So Tina, I don't think is as amazing as we all think. She's just very dangerous. So, like, her threat level would be super high, but, like, her actual, you know, presence on the board, not super scary, not someone you can, like, build an effective team around per se. Still very good, of course, but not A tier, I don't believe anymore. And for that same reason, I'm going to go ahead and put Megavore there at the top of the B tier. Again, no loop potential, so it's kind of hard to place him up there with all the big boys and ladies. But Megavore is going to go down there, I think. I'm going to pull Ketris up top there because his damage output is extremely high and it scales. So that's pretty cool. I'm putting Worldbreaker even higher because I'm finding I'm enjoying the heck out of some Worldbreaker. I'm going to move High King Irongut up to the A tier just because from a pure event perspective, it's kind of getting harder for me to justify why I would put him randomly in the B tier versus like somewhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and chuck him in that A tier from an event perspective. Definitely super good. I'm going to pull Yasmin's down that far, even under there. I'm going to put Yasmin there. Ultimately, still really decent damage. The fact that she entangles all the time is pretty good. The mana generation is pretty nice. But when it comes to a comparison between the Wild Queen's damage output and potential versus someone like Yasmin's, I think Wild Queen kind of wins. So those are all those tweaks, at least up at that level. What I like about this list now is that it's really clear who you should absolutely be gunning to craft. Like, all 6 of these are must-haves as far as I'm concerned. You know, if any of these are available in the Soul Forge, for instance, I would be easy to recommend any of them. Obviously, if you can get Zool, that's great. But any of these that are available are kind of must-gets. And then it kind of gets a little more circumstantial once you get down here. So I think those are all the tweaks I want to make at the A tier level. I do want to make some tweaks down here as well. I'm going to pull Champion of Guard down with his bro. Still better than Mr. Stonehammer, but not quite as good. I want to pull Queen of Sin down above those folks. Probably there-ish. I want to pull Scorpius up because there's a lot more poison options in the game these days. It's still kind of the weaknesses of the troop are pretty similar to how they've always been. However, since there are more options to poison now versus the handful that we had before, and the Dervish class allows him to scale, definitely want to pull him up a bit. I'm going to pull Doomclaw up a tad, but that's largely it. I'm going to go ahead and put Undyne down there. That feels a lot better to me now as far as all these troops and their respective effectiveness. The only other tweak I'd want to make is down here. I'm going to pull Guard's Avatar, probably like in their range, just because his damage potential can be very high. Like, theoretically, Guard's Avatar could outdamage most or all of these troops on the board. It just requires a lot of setup to specifically do it, to make it super meaningful. So I think there is pretty fair. But now, let's actually get to the new people. Aquaticus, where do we throw Our Lady of the Sea? I think I'm going to throw Our Lady of the Sea here. I'm going to start her here for now. And the reason I'm going to leave her there is Infernus is kind of someone I constantly compared her against, and Aquaticus is basically very similar to Infernus. The main difference between the two of them is that he is more offensive, which I rate more highly in this game, and she is more defensive, which I rate less highly in this game. So when it comes to events and PvP and all of that stuff, I think Infernus is going to yield a lot more value. He's going to enable you to not only do more damage, not with his ability, but with the burning component. That's going to add more damage, and then enabling classes that have Fireblade to do more. That's why he's up here. The reason she's down here is because submerging all of your troops, even though their spell looks the same essentially, submerging your troops is not nearly as interesting as potentially burning, which enables a lot of other fun mechanics. So I'm going to put her here. As far as Guild Wars Blue Day goes, I think she's going to be a godsend. We've kind of been fishing for a troop that's meaningful there, at least I have been. So I think she's going to be definitely a must craft. Can loop, does really solid damage. Definitely a very valuable troop. When it comes to Vash, Vash is somebody that I'm going to probably throw in around here. He does scale, but he's very awkward to use, and that's kind of why I'm making this comparison to Guard's Avatar. It does scale, but it requires wind up, and I'd say Vash is even more awkward to use than Guard's Avatar, since you have to be constantly killing your own troops to do it. There's kind of hurdles in your way to get there. The fact that he curses is super cool, but unfortunately I think that's kind of about as good as he is at the moment. So there's your updated Mythic tier list. If we jump over to the class tier list, this is where we left everything last time we chat. And I think we want to make some edits here too, real quick. So as far as my play and some adjustments that I'd like to make, I'm going to throw Priest class down a lot further. Generally, it's not all that exciting to be using the Priest class. It's Divine, so it kind of synergizes at least with Divine Ishbala teams more specifically. However, because of the new Orpheus Verse weapon, I actually am going to be placing War Priest up a good amount. That's the Thief class. Let's throw that back. Priest class, down there. Too close, too similar. War Priest is basically the better version of Priest. It's got Skull Reduction, which is better. It has the Orpheus Verse weapon, which synergizes with humans, which this is, which enables this to work with a lot of other teams, which is really, really great. So I think in terms of survivability and damage output, this is actually a really, really nice class now. And I think the Orpheus Verse weapon was exactly the thing that we needed to try and make this a lot more interesting. So I'm going to move War Priest up a lot. I think right there makes a lot of sense. Beyond all of that, I think I'm going to put Tidecaller in the B tier. It's definitely not like the most exciting thing on the planet these days. It is great. It self-cleanses, it gets you lots of bonus mana, it freezes at the start. It's got some cool benefits, like there's no question about it. I just don't know if I'd necessarily call it A tier. I am going to leave the rest of that alone, I think. I'm pretty comfortable with that, so I'll leave that all alone. But let's place the new classes up here a little bit. So for the new classes, I think I'm going to throw Corsair about here. Probably at the top of the C tier. That probably makes the most sense. The fact that I can make a lot of blue mana is very useful. And when I say make, it doesn't literally make it, it just generates a lot of it when you match it. So it'll definitely make your blue teams ramp up faster, but as far as what else it doesn't really have anything else. The scaling of magic, if you get it to 100, is obviously nice, but it's not like the fastest, it's +1. I'm obviously not going to complain about that, but when I have to think about would I pick this class over something like a Tidecaller or a Frost Mage, the answer is a resounding no. I would rather run either of these classes instead of the Corsair class. So unfortunately, down at the C tier. The Hierophant class is probably going to go somewhere different than you think I'm going to put it. You probably think I'm going to throw it here, and I want to throw it here, but since it does have Fireblade, I think it's got to go at least here, probably even here. Yeah, I think that's about right. Warlord is already down here because it doesn't really do too much awesome stuff aside from Fireblade, and it's basically the same reason with Hierophant. This is a more offensive version, this is a more defensive version, but in terms of like where it should go on this list, I think it's basically there. Like, I'm not really going to design teams around this. I'm not going to design teams around this either. There's kind of better classes to do what either of these do. So if you're looking for Fireblade, you've got your #1 class on the planet up there in Sunspear, and you've also got an amazing utility class in the Dragon Guard. Unfortunately, that puts Hierophant right there. But that is everything as far as the tier list updates for both of these. Stormcaller, I suspect, might have a good chance of going there. So we'll see if that pans out. But I suspect that's not going to be very good. But that's your tier list update video. That is everything that I have to tell you about as far as what's changed since the last time I made this. So I will catch you guys in the next one. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and all that other fun stuff. Okay, bye.